I guess I could come off mute now. Hello.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages people, projects, or processes for a living. I am Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, the founder of Collab Talk, and welcome to another episode where Sharon and I explore leadership topics and management topics and project management topics from the perspective of what not to do.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. This is great. We always get to talk about all kinds of fun topics.
A lot of depressing topics and spin around. No, we're trying to turn it around, Sharon. It's what not to do is the negative thing and be more positive.
Well, speaking of, today we are talking about a really hard truth in project management. Basically the idea that sometimes the bravest move isn't about pushing through and working harder. It's actually pulling the plug and admitting failure, saying we're done. This isn't the right thing. Let's go a different direction. So this episode is called Abandoning Ship Too Late. And it's about what happens when leaders let failing initiatives drift far longer than they should.
I like this from more of a project perspective rather than like a company or something or like that perspective. Yeah. Although, yeah, I mean, hey, just apply it as the truth hits and hurts. We've all seen some degree of this. So the project it's almost back on track. The timeline that keeps getting adjusted. The budget that quietly grows because scope is creeping up there. Nobody wants to be the one that says, Sharon, this is just not working.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really funny is, there's a lot of ego.
What
has to do with this? Nobody wants us to change. There's everything from the idea of a sunk cost. We're already involved. We're already in. We've already put so much time, effort, energy, blood, sweat, tears, whatever into it.
Years of effort.
Years of effort, right? I've already done this for so long. You don't understand. There's fear of admitting a mistake and being accountable, and saying, yeah, it just isn't doing the trick. It's not working, whatever. And so instead of making a decisive call and just saying, look, let's call it for what it is. Let's go a different direction. Let's do something different. Leaders just keep letting things go, right? Let the project run. We'll hope that, momentum will magically just fix all the problems that are happening.
Sharon, hope is not a strategy. We know this, the longer that it takes, it's just like when, fixing a bug in software. The longer it takes you to fix the problem, the further out, the more expensive it gets to fix that, and painful it is to get back on track. And so, and even to shut things down, more people are counting on it. There's more momentum. There's more effort involved the longer that it goes. I always like to explain this. I used to illustrate this in slides with a classic and important American film, which of course I'm referring to Spaceballs. And remember when the bad guys with Dark Helmet Man, or whatever is the big helmet man, they jump into hyperspeed and they go plaid. But it's this whole idea that in hyperspace, and I used to show that it's like, oh, they've gone plaid. They've gone the wrong direction. If you are moving the wrong direction, you move 10 feet, it's not that big of a difference. If you're millions of miles in outer space, you're in another galaxy. And so the longer that you take to correct the course, redirect the ship, you end up on the wrong continent.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to say out loud, like, are you really a leader or a manager if you've never had to call it and say, I think we're going the wrong direction, or I think we need to make a change that probably is going to make some people unhappy? Like, I think, if we're being really transparent, we're being really honest, I think as leaders and managers, frankly, I don't think we talk about it enough. The idea that sometimes things just don't go the way that you expect. Now, not every project needs to die, right? Not every struggling issue is, completely over. Sometimes you need a minor course change. Sometimes you need a reset. sometimes you have to do something more drastic. But ultimately, leaders have to distinguish between what's something that's a temporary thing that I just need to make a change to versus something that's just probably not ever going to work, no matter how much time, energy, money, anything that I throw at it.
I think like organizationally, I look at this with like reorgs. In truth, there are reorgs that happen to kind of pave over and cover up like messes up. It's not done for the right reasons. There's other organizations that realize that, you know what, we're going to restructure this to be more optimal. This wasn't working, or this part worked, but we fit this project, and to be successful in the next one, we need to structure things differently, move people around, leadership around, focus and initiatives. And so that's why some organizations that aren't afraid of the reorg, they don't look at it as a negative. They look at it as, we have the flexibility to go structure for a retool for the next stage of these projects. I like that. But this all comes down to, hey, is there a real actual judgment around this? Like, do we tighten the scope? Do we change the leadership? Do we reorganize the teams? Do we reset our expectations? Here's what we were driving towards. We were wrong. We need to reset our expectations. I love the phrase, it's the plan of record. There's nothing wrong with recognizing this isn't working. Let's reset this new plan of record. Go.
Yeah.
That's how I think that there is integrity. There's strength in acknowledging this initiative, this effort, this project. It no longer aligns with our strategy. We need to do something different. This is not working. We're going to try this instead. I see that as strength.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you drag out something that basically doesn't have, it has an extremely low chance of succeeding, it doesn't always show. I mean, it doesn't show commitment. It kind of shows a little bit of stupidity, right? Because it's like, why are you continuing to go down a losing path over and over and over and over?
Hope, Sharon.
It's hope. Yeah, I agree. Hope is not a strategy. And ultimately, what it can do long term, more so, is it can also affect the things around you, right? So it's going to drain morale from your team. It's going to burn resources. And ultimately, it will damage your credibility.
If you wait too long, well, you finally do call it, and we're going to change course here. The team, they're exhausted. They're demoralized from that. And then they're going to be skeptical of, that next plan. It's going to be difficult for them to get motivated there versus, hey, we caught it relatively early. We're going to adjust this. Go.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think ultimately, hopefully, and I don't know if you want to call it good leaders, strong leaders, brave leaders.
I'll call it. I'll do it. I'll call that. But yeah.
Ultimately, I think that they are willing to say, I don't always know that they know for sure, but I think they're willing to say when they think things should change, when they think that things should completely stop, and when they should do something different. And when they do that, everybody's on the same page, and it brings clarity and dignity to the group. But ultimately, and again, like I said, I don't think we talk about this topic enough in leadership.
Yeah.
It really takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of, bravery to stand up and say, you're not going to like this, but we're headed the wrong direction. I actually have, it's really funny. So the Stephen Covey 7 Habits, series is huge. And I have a page that's torn out of one of my calendars from like 20 years ago. And it says, a leader is the person who runs up the tree to see where everybody's going. And their job isn't always to make sure to lead the people. It's when they're at the top of that tree, it's their job to call out, we're in the wrong jungle.
Yeah.
Right? So it's that idea of having the bravery and the courage to tell everybody, not even necessarily we're going the wrong direction. We got to pack our bags and go somewhere.
We've gone plaid, Sharon. Yeah. As always, should be a great conversation. Folks, if you're joining us for the first time, please go over and subscribe to us out on YouTube. Find us out, Project Failure Files. We'd love it if you subscribed, follow us. We have these episodes every Monday morning. We've been doing this for over a year and a half now, and we have lots more coming up. So we'd love to hear from you. Other ideas for episodes. I hope you enjoy the episode here. But they're a lot of fun to do, although they sometimes it can be painful because we've lived through these experiences. But hopefully you find it useful.
Yeah, I think somebody said in one of the comments, it's like, therapy for project managers. Come join us for a therapy session. We'll share ours if you share yours.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's get started with some definitions.
Yeah, I think this is, I think we've kind of stated it in the intro. It's about, allowing a failing project to continue. And that could be, a lot of things. I think because we put so much of ourselves into the projects, sometimes it feels like I can't let people down. I can't, like I've spent all this time and all those kinds of efforts. It's like, yeah, but another way to think of it, it's like if you were paying for all of this, it was your money. Would you keep investing in this? Would you keep why are you so ready to spend the company's money on something that you wouldn't be willing to do? That might be a sign that it's time to reset or pivot away to something different or a complete shutdown of the project.
Yeah. And I think the key here, that we're not talking about, some things aren't going exactly the way you expect, or maybe you've had to shift some team resources or members, or even maybe, there's some scope change or some scope creep. I mean, things like that happen all the time. What we're talking about is you've invested time, energy, budget, all of those things. And ultimately, it's just keeps falling flat on its face, and you're just trying to kind of drag it along anyways.
You're ignoring the dashboards around it.
Yes.
I think of it this way, Sharon. Abandoning ship too late. It's not about failure. We went in, we thought this was the right approach. We all agreed. We put the plan in. We moving forward on that.
Yep.
But then the data is coming in. It's not aligning. The feedback from customers is not there. Whatever it is, it's denial of the data. It's like the signs are saying that this was the wrong move. We've learned more. We now know this was the wrong approach. Yet because you've spent too much time and too much effort and things around it, you keep going where this is like you're on the Titanic. You're on the Titanic. You've already hit it. The alarms have been going off. And you're just like, well, maybe we can make it to shore.
Well, there's warnings. You're all the lights are flashing, and you're just running around putting duct tape over all of the flashing lights.
Yeah, there's a big difference between persistence, because I'm all for that, and sunk cost bias. Because we've taken this time, because we've spent this money, we've done this, we're going to keep going. Well, the data shows us otherwise. And courage, as you said, it's not always pushing harder. Sometimes it's we all recognized it and speak up sooner.
Yeah. And, we're talking about the idea of abandoning ship too late. But another thing to think about, too, is, how do you know, right? So we're going to talk about the impacts of, what it can cause you to happen. But ultimately, how do you know when you're supposed to start? And we've talked multiple times about metrics. We've talked multiple times about reporting. We've talked multiple times about making sure that you're being transparent and having feedback loops. And so I think, this kind of brings all those things full circle, because if you don't have those things, then what ends up happening is you have leaders that are completely unaware of all those red flashing lights because they don't know that they're happening. And that could be a mix of not enough reporting, not enough information, not enough communication, not enough transparency, not enough feedback loops, all those things that we've said exist in a healthy, mature organization. Those things don't exist. And so we're just letting this thing happen. And we're like, oh, well, it's fine. Everything's fine. Right. And so ultimately what ends up happening is people, teams, organization start being like, wait, what's going on? because all of those things are missing.
Yeah. This is where, having healthy dialogue around the projects, the portfolio view of what's going on. And again, everyone wants to protect their baby. I'm going to say the word again, Sharon, it's almost every episode. If you have a more clinical approach, you take the personality, personal side of it out of and say, here are the facts. Here's this. We've identified these risks. We're now experiencing that's a red flag versus a temporary setback. Temporary setback is this vendor was going to deliver the parts that we needed on this date. It's going to be another 2 weeks, behind that, but otherwise we're still on plan. We've got to let the customer know it's going to be delayed 2 weeks. It's out of our control here. Versus no, they never tested the design. The data never proved that it could actually accomplish this. That's like a red flag. But it could be that you've identified 10 possible scenarios of bad things that could happen. That's your risk analysis. We've hit 6 of the 10. Is now a good time to say do you have to hit every bump on the road while you're driving the car? Come on.
Well, and I think another thing that becomes really obvious is, and this is something to watch for, when I do leadership training, I talk about smelling for smoke, right? We don't ever want to have to deal with fires. And so we try as leaders to kind of be aware of the smoke that's happening. Yeah. And I think what you start to notice in any sort of project that's kind of doomed is that people start to get really stressed out because they're like, I'm just going to not kind of mention what's going on over here. And so they end up starting to have this level of stress. And you start noticing that people are frustrated and they're not like working forward anymore. People tend to be more reactive than proactive. Like you start seeing a shift in the way that people are working together and, all of that energy changes.
It's the sentiment analysis of the day-to-day. It really is. It's there's a reason why you see them once in a while. You go to the grocery store and they've got, as you leave, just like, how was your visit? And it has a smiley face, and an unhappy face, whatever. And so, are there kids that get in there and just constantly hit repeatedly the unhappy face kind of stuff? There's a way of cleaning the data from that, but overall it can tell you shifts in sentiment around the overall experience. It's a piece of data out there, so there are different ways that you can measure. That's like just one way. You can't constantly survey your people every day to get that real-time sentiment analysis, but through your one-on-one interviews, in the discussions, the things that you pick up in here, you get signals that tell you that that people are stressed out, that they lack faith in the leadership of the executive team. General morale starts to drop. You can feel it, you can sense it. And usually when you're sensing it, you've got to go with your gut. It's a real thing. If you feel like morale, then there's something going on. When the team's healthy and happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're feeling that there's something going on and you don't know why, then that's something that you need to go and investigate.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, like, you can feel that. And then what ends up happening is that kind of culturally, the more that we allow that kind of feeling to exist, the more normalized it becomes. And then what ends up happening is everybody's just like, well, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to make any decisions. We're not going to talk about, we're not going to change path on anything. So let's just kind of just keep doing whatever it is we're doing, and whatever happens, happens. And culturally, this whole mindset just shifts in the way that the teams work.
Yeah. The never admit failure culture. That there are, and especially if it's even worse than that, if I raise these issues, if I point out these risks and people see that I get punished or I get shouted down. I've had this happen. Manager was angry that I brought it up. I'm just telling you the state. This is what I see, what I perceive, what I know, and you're getting mad that it's the shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
That side of it's like that's a bad thing.
Well,
yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, because if there's not a system in place to deal with that, then here's what ends up happening, right? Team members don't know how to escalate. So we've talked about escalation in other episodes, right? We've talked about keeping track of things in other episodes where it's like, okay, how do I escalate correctly to the right, place? But if there's no true way for them to provide that feedback in a timely manner, and now they're coming and saying, hey, something bad is happening, and that leader does not have a path or a way to manage it, then they're feeling very accountable and very kind of, held over a barrel, like, okay, now what do I do? Right. Yeah. And so ultimately it's very systemic, and it's problems creating other problems. And so ultimately this creates this kind of negative cycle of, I don't know what to do. We don't have a path. There's no decision. So it's going to cause people to feel bad. And then they say, hey, I feel bad. And then the leader goes, well, I can't do anything about it. So now we're all going to feel worse about it. And so it just kind of creates this negative cycle, as opposed to at some point, a leader, a manager, somebody goes, look, I see this is happening. Now, what are we going to do about it? Right. Let's put some stuff in place. Let's proactively start managing to this. And now all of a sudden we can shift that from a negative cycle to a positive cycle.
Right. You're right. I think I can quickly list out kind of the pitfalls of this, and we can then jump into the solution, the positive side, which is always so much more.
I just wanted to have a little ray of sunshine in a dark cloud.
No, but thinking about, if leaders delay, taking action on what they see, so the costs continue to rise. You have it's part of the problem in this decision paralysis, where they are adjusting the plan versus, we all know, stop, pull the plug on this. We need to stop doing this. Why are you tweaking it? And so there's this sunk cost fallacy, that line of thinking, we've invested too much here. We can't stop this. People are exhausted. People are demoralized. And so then there starts to be, it affects other projects that are actually healthy, that are on the right path. It's called strategic drift. And so if people are demoralized in other areas, it has a downstream effect. And people just think, well, this seems to be going positive, but what are they not telling me about this project? So there's that loss of trust. So that is, dragging something out doesn't prove commitment. It means people realize this, it proves you're avoiding the problems.
Yep.
So let's jump into this, Sharon. Let's talk about strategies for overcoming the issue.
Yeah. I think ultimately, again, in a perfect world, right? In an ideal situation, to your point, it is treated clinically, right? We understand what we're doing. We have all kinds of checks and balances in place to be able to identify red flags early on. We smell for smoke, right? That's what we want to make sure that if smoke pops up anywhere, we know where it is, we know what it smells like, and we are standing there with a fire extinguisher.
It's also a reason why some people wondered why did they just bring this outside consultant in? This is what I told them as well. And sometimes it's because it's a real thing, that somebody coming in with a fresh set of eyes and outside experiences. It's not that they don't believe you per se. Mm-hmm. They're looking for a second opinion from another doctor type thing to move forward. Like, are we too close to it? Are we blind to it? Other issues. So you start by defining red flags before you're emotional about it, about the project. Are there repeated missed milestones, rising costs, shifting goals? These aren't minor bumps. They're signals. And sometimes that outside consultant, you've been that consultant, I've been that consultant, brought in to tell you, this is what I see. And the leadership team says, okay, that's what we thought. All right. And then make a decision and go.
Yeah. And then I think, once you kind of know like what your metrics are and what you're missing and where you're missing them, then you can be more strategic and analytical and say, okay, let's look at this and let's see, is this something that is correctable, or is this something that is headed down a path, right? So
Right.
I have a Six Sigma black belt, and in Six Sigma, you spend a ridiculous amount of time doing statistical analysis. And the reason is because ultimately what the goal is to convert every single real world use case into math. Because math tells a story, math doesn't have emotions. Math is that clinical perspective. Because if I can put this on an XY coordinate and I can look at it, I can see, is it going up or is it going down? And ultimately, if I can identify the red flags, I know what my metrics are, I can then look at it on a graph and say, is this something that's just a blip that ultimately can be fixed? Or is this an overall failure that is never going to get better no matter what we do to try to fix it?
Right. And there are some things, and look, I speak out sometimes on the, the dangers of managing through spreadsheets and just looking at the data and not having conversations with people. And there's different aspects of that. But I mean, I've shared a few times here, during business school, learning not a Six Sigma black belt or green belt or any belt. I have a belt. I'm wearing a belt, but that's the limit of what I have. No, but we learned something, different methods for tracking, like feature designs for a product, for software product, for example, and scoring mechanisms. So you have a methodology, a scoring, and so you score it based on, the personnel that are required, the time, the customer impact. You've got these different factors, and you score it on those different mechanisms. And the model that I'm talking about is called the House of Quality. You can go read about that and find that. Visio, there's a House of Quality template in there for tracking. But you input these things in, and almost every single time, based on the scores, and Six Sigma does the similar thing, where you score it, you are completely clinical in your approach to that. You're dispassionate about it. And the priorities it comes back with are almost every time different than what you thought. And so it's a great way to remove the bias and to add more visibility in there, because of the perspectives of the different people that have to feed into that model. But it goes back to distinguishing between, is this just a setback? Is this just, hey, we have resource gaps, we've got the vendor that's late? Is it truly scope creep or not? Is this misalignment of roles, of teams, little things like that, versus the data was incorrect from the test, or there's not clear value here, or we sold off that side of the business. Now, why are we doing this project in support of that side of the business that we no longer own? Things like that, where it's a complete structural failure, and we just need to cut our losses, learn from that, and go.
But you don't understand, Christian. We're unique.
Yeah.
And different.
Well, there's other things you can do, and hopefully you've done before you get to the point where you might go in there and say, just like the reorg, let's go in a reorg and see with a different structure, bring in different leader, different PM with fresh eyes on the problem. Do we need to tighten the scope? Do we, and in fact, again, going back to software companies, one of the best ways that you handle this is saying, okay, no, on our next run, this 30-day scope, we're going to do a third of the features that we promised, but we're going to make sure that they work and give us more time to do that and do it right. Build on top of that, maybe add more things in if we're able, if we're success, if it tests well, and you move forward. So tighten the scope, reset expectations with stakeholders, and then or even break a project up into smaller chunks. There's a lot of things you can do strategically that are not just, let's just keep going with the way that we're doing it.
Yeah. And if you try to save it, so okay, so we've identified what's going on. We have statistically or used metrics to figure out, is it worth it or not? And, maybe we decide, okay, we think that if we make a few changes, potentially it's going to be okay, right? You then need to sit everybody down and you need to say, look, we know we've been struggling. We know there's issues. We've identified what they are. We're doing our best to fix them. Here's what we're trying to do. Everybody's on board. And ultimately, the idea here is to call it for what it is and let people know that you're not hiding.
Right.
You know that it's an issue. You're trying to fix it. And everybody kind of hopefully will have a little bit more morale around the entire thing, assuming you're trying to get back on track.
The strongest cultures, they don't punish bad news. They reward early escalation. Hey, we found this error. And so there's a way of projecting like what this saved us by finding this mistake, this error, this problem. The earlier that you confront reality, the more options you still have.
Yes.
We're going to retool this. We're going to go a different direction versus we're so far down. Like all we can do is cut our losses and go from there.
And speaking of cutting your losses, if you've done all of this, you've looked at everything, and the math doesn't add up, right? The metrics don't add up. The statistics show maybe not the right curve that you want. Then you have to decide, okay, we're not going to do this. And you have to stop it, right? And that process is going to include things like, if you're really, really smart, identifying the lessons learned, thanking the team for their effort, and owning the decision to say, it's not a great decision. We don't want to have to make it, but sometimes you just have to do it.
Yeah. Practice courage, Sharon.
Practice courage.
I mean, it's a look if it means that in your next meeting, your next project review, you bring up like, here's the uncomfortable truths. You can even throw it out there. It says, I think we need to shut down this project. I don't think that I think it's irreversible and we need to move on and focus elsewhere. Don't be afraid to raise your voice and suggest that. And it might be people, again, egos involved, emotions, the ownership, of that. People our projects are our babies. We treat it that way. We invest so much of ourselves in them. But I just think that, again, a healthy organization, if you're in a healthy organization, then that is the right approach. Do the right thing because it's the right thing, regardless of the consequences.
Yeah. And, a lot of times nobody's done anything wrong.
Right.
It's an external change that's happened. It's really funny. So I was watching, there's this new show called Pull to Pull, which, by the way, if you haven't watched it, you definitely should. And Will Smith is going to all these different places around the planet. And he's checking things out. And a little bit of spoiler, but one of the places he goes is in the South Pacific, and where there are several islands. And ultimately, as the water levels are rising, people are losing the places that they have lived, right, for a very, very long time, for generations. And I think about stuff like that. They didn't do anything wrong, right? They didn't make a mistake. They didn't not do something that caused that. The water is literally creeping in and covering the land where they live, right? But at some point, they have to say, this isn't working anymore. Yeah. Right? We can't live here if it's all water.
Don't be the frogs in the slowly heating up boiling water.
Right. And, there's lots of stories like this all over the place. But I think about that in the idea of, at some point, somebody has to stand up and say, I know that we've got generations of people who have lived here. This is our home. This is our background. This is everything we know. And it's not our fault that it's happening, but we just can't do this anymore and we have to make a change. And I know that this is way larger than any project that people work with at work, but ultimately sometimes it's outside of your control and you just have to be the one to stand up and go, hey, this isn't working anymore. Let's do something different.
I'm sorry, because I have of course.
Are you laughing about the water rising on
No, I have just in mind one of my favorite Simpson quotes. Homer Simpson, you tried and you failed. What did we learn? Never try. I was like, oh, I should have had that video clip in here and played that, but yeah.
So best practices, I think what's really interesting is, so one of the things when we talk about best practices is having checkpoints, right? So if they think about the water coming in on the land, right? How far does the water have to come into my home before I say, I don't think I should live here anymore, right? So ultimately, if you say, I'm going to wait until I want to not be here anymore, that might be too late. Instead, if you say, we have objective criteria, if it passes this line in the sand, that's too far. Mm-hmm. Now, all of a sudden, we've removed the emotion from it. We've removed the frustration from it. And we've just simply said, if we hit this metric, things change. And that helps us to be able to make changes quickly.
Yep. So I have something kind of a parallel, but I think is a great example of that. Previous company, we were doing a lot of events. And so I had salespeople that were constantly coming and say, hey, I think we should do this event. I think we've got a lot of prospects in the area, existing clients and other things. We actually so had them do a little bit of work. We came up with a ratio and said, and it was basically like a 5-point scale, and anything that was a 3 or higher, we just did. Like they could show it that this was the deal flow in that region, and the cost was such for travel, like 2 or 3 people to go to this event, and to whether we sponsored or not, or we're just there attending, whatever it was, other meetings in the area, all those kinds of things. But if it were, between 3 and 5, we didn't even have to go get approval. It automatically qualified if the salesperson was going to go, like start putting the plan together, talk to the travel team, get it booked. If it was between a 2.5 and 3, because it was the tenths of a point there, if it was strategic, we'd discuss. But if it was 2.5 or lower, it could have been just at like 2.4. Nope, we don't do it. The only factor was if it was between 2 and 2.5, and we had people out in various regions that were local. If it were local, then the answer was yes, at 2 or higher. If it was under 2, even with the local, we don't do the event. So it made it clinical. It made it easy. Mm-hmm. They can go and track. They've got the data. If it hits the numbers, they know to go and pester us for, hey, we're going to go and do this event or not. And so coming up with that kind of data around your projects, around those indicators, those risks. Again, if you're having healthy dialogue around your projects, then it's easier then for people to feel comfortable in bringing up when positive and negative things are happening around a project.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about this over and over and over and over and over. No matter what you do, no matter what decision you make, learn from it.
Yeah.
Whether you call it a postmortem or retrospective or a lessons learned or any of the other fancy buzzwords, the point of it is, no matter what your decision is, when you are done and you get to the end, make sure that you identify what are the things that you learned out of that you can ultimately carry forward with you to make better choices for the next time. And sometimes there's very clear choices and sometimes there's not so clear choices, but at least you learned.
Yep. I think that is a great place to wrap up, Sharon. And I know for folks, again, if you're not yet following us out on YouTube, go and find us under Project Failure Files. We would love to find us on Substack as well and follow the new newsletter that's out there. We've got a couple episodes that are underway. and provide links and our additional thoughts, our personal thoughts on each of these topics as well. So that's going to be growing and expanding, but we'd love to see you again. We'll be back next Monday. We're every Monday morning at, where are we at? 9 a.m. Pacific. Every Monday for the rest of our lives, we will be there, but happy to do that. So we'll see you at the next one.
See you next time.